Hi friends, I'm Becca Scott and welcome to How to Play Painters Corner. We're painting all 7 of the monster figures featured in Horrified Universal Monsters from Ravensburger. Be sure to check out all things Horrified on How to Play and Game the Game right here on Geek and Sundry. And now, our painting expert Nox Berf tries to tame the Wolfman. Oh!
Thanks, Becca. Like you said, we've got the Wolfman, and while he may bite, his paint job won't. Let's get started. Before we begin painting, it's helpful to do some prep work. We're going to gather some simple tools and we're going to use them to clean up the imperfections in the model that can happen during the manufacturing process. We're going to use an X-Acto knife or a hobby knife to clean off the mold lines. It's fairly common to have these and it's going to be easy to remove with just a little bit of work. You're also going to want a hobby file and an emery board. We're going to use these to smooth out surfaces to create a perfect finish before we begin our priming process. Now that our miniature has been prepped, we're ready to prime. To do so, we're going to start with a basic black undercoat. Now I'm using an airbrush to do this, but don't be intimidated if you don't have an airbrush. You can do this with an aerosol spray can that you can get from a hobby store or from online. Once you have the black undercoat completed, what we're going to do is we're going to use a white ink. And that white ink is going to be sprayed in one direction over the black undercoat. And it's going to create what's called a zenithal highlight. And what that's going to do is it's going to simulate light and shadow, depth and nuance on our miniature. We're now ready to begin base coating the Wolfman. The first thing that I painted was the shirt, and I chose a thin yellow glaze to do that. As with all the glazes that we're putting over our zenithal highlights, we're going to use thin layers, slowly built up over time. And I let that glaze dry in between each step. It's important because if you put too much glaze on a miniature all at once, you can pool and begin to lose detail. Once the shirt was dry, I began painting on the pants. I wanted a darker tone here so that the eye would instinctively move upward on the miniature, not down at the feet. So we're using the yellow to contrast against the dark color of the pants. Once all of that is dry, I begin painting on the fur and skin. I used 2 different brown tones staying true to the original from the movie, but I began slowly blending the edges of both the flesh and the fur together. I've carried the dark tones through the entire model on both the back of the hands and the back of the feet, using the regular flesh tone, the same that I use on the face, on both the claws and the feet. With the base coat complete, it's now time for the fine details. All of the hair has been carefully highlighted, and now I'm ready to move on to the shirt. Now I've decided to go with a flannel design here, and to do that I'm using a fine tip brush and a little bit of red paint. I'm going to slowly and carefully brace my hand as I work through the back of the shirt and the sides to create a pattern and a grid work of lines. If I've made any mistakes, I've corrected it with a lighter yellow color. And with that, your Wolfman is ready for the gaming table. And that is the Wolfman, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, we'll be painting the rest of the Universal Monsters right here on Geek and Sundry. And if you want to see some other Universal Monsters in action, tune in to Game the Game, coming to you on October 3rd. And be sure to check out Horrified Universal Monsters, available now at Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble, and your local hobby store. I'm Nox Berf, and I'll see you next time.